always ready.
Allison is always ready. So, hey everyone, welcome to the Aeon 14 podcast. My name is James S. Aaron, and I'm joined by the Aeon 14 team, including our illustrious leader, Michael Cooper. We're here to talk about all things Aeon 14, from the science behind the series to science fiction in general, and other things that we think are cool, and things that you let us know that you'd like to hear about. So hit us up on the Facebook group or email or any other of those things that are available. On board today, we've got our editor, Jen McDonald, our narrator, Allison Stennett, and authors Jenny Green and Lisa Richmond. Today, we're exploring a few aspects of living in the future, or as Michael said, the logistics of the future. Starting with the far future of education. Will we plug knowledge into our brains, a la the Matrix, or will the imitation methods humans have used since we lived in caves live on? That sounded a lot better in my head. We're also going to talk about a few other nuts and bolts things, like how trade might work in a non-FTL future versus FTL, how information might spread across vast distances, and other aspects of day-to-day life. But before we get into that, let's do some updates. Michael.
That's me. Let's see. I finally got the hardcover version of the art book in my grubby little hands. And for whatever reason, it's got blank pages at the front and back. So I have to figure out why that is. But I'll have it up very soon. But it is, actually move my microphone so I can grab it.
Will those be good for like writing notes and things in?
Maybe.
This page left intentionally blank?
Yeah.
I shall create my own doodle.
I think because it's a proof that that caused one of the pages to blank. But yeah, it's got like 3 blank pages at the back for some reason. It's got a blank page at the front. So I want to find out from them exactly why that is. But otherwise it looks gorgeous. It is fantastic, and it is hard and hardcovery.
The cover looks nice.
Yeah, it looks great. So that I'm going to be getting that sorted out, and if it turns out that the blank page at the front and one at the back is just because it was a proof copy, because it has like this extra barcode in the back that I think is because of that, then I'll be fine with it and I'll be able to order them. I'm just waiting for a response on that.
Does it have a jacket?
No, it does not have a jacket.
Okay.
Those cost more money, and I didn't feel like designing one.
None of my other ones have jackets. That seems like a thing with art books.
None of the others do? Yeah, I don't think they do. No.
I tend to buy art books like for video games and stuff, and they don't typically have jackets.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would just increase the cost. I mean, I guess if people wanted a version with a jacket, I could get a version with a jacket. But I always found that dust jackets are just a thing that gets ruined, you know?
I love dust jackets, but yeah, my wife and I have a disagreement about this, because she will always leave the dust jacket on the book while she reads it to protect the book, whereas I carefully take the dust jacket off and put it away.
I do too.
Yeah, so I always put the dust jacket on the spot.
My husband just throws it away. Me too. Yep.
He throws it away? That's like what the UO library does. They throw them away.
I'm like, it was supposed to protect the... And he's like, it gets in my way. I just...
Well, I guess not. You don't want to invest in that then. If you're not going to do that.
I'm like, okay. Can I buy a book without a jacket? Because it's just going to be a ton of trash.
Well, a lot of books, the cover art is on the jacket and not on the book itself, too. So
yeah.
That's what I tell him.
Yeah.
I'm like, you take the jacket off, and then there's just a book with
no pretty picture. This would actually have it on both. This would be one of those scenarios where it would be on the cover, and it would have a dust jacket with it as well.
Yeah. So there's really no need. Yeah.
So that will be soon, because I know some people have been waiting for the hardcover. So I expect I'm going to have them at Vegas, which is only 6 weeks away now.
Don't say
very close.
Don't say that. We have deadlines.
I know we have a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of things coming up. And I got to buy T-shirts for everybody too before then. I got to source T-shirts that aren't as expensive as the ones at Society 6. Because anyway, lots of things to do. We're just under 2 weeks away from the next Perilous Alliance book coming out, which is Critical Inertia, which we'll see Kylie and we'll actually get more Grayson again this time, because Grayson wasn't in the last book that much, so we'll have more of him as Kylie hunts the rest of her family down. Poor girl, this is her job. Okay, go and find your family and bring them to justice. It was it's the crappiest mission anyone has ever gotten. So there's that. And then on top of that, Jill and I have actually just last night started talking about the plans for another series she's going to start writing, which is going to be And for those of you who don't know, Jill, my wife, is Chris J. Pike. She's very sneaky. I outed her right away because I'm just like, I can't do this. I can't pretend there's this Chris J. Pike person that doesn't exist.
Where is this guy?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's going to be a YA Aeon 14 series. It's going to be first person. It's going to follow a young teenager. It's going to follow like a young Laura Croft type character.
Cool.
It's going to be pretty neat. It's going to take place on a world that has fallen back to war, lost technology, lost space flight, and is basically going to be like a 1990s planet Earth.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty wild. I'm looking forward to that quite a bit.
Can you incorporate hammer pants? That would be cool.
Hammer pants.
Yeah, hammer pants and fluorescent shoelaces. It's all going to be there. Walkmans, the whole deal. Yeah. Well, we're not going to go quite that crazy. I don't know exactly where it's going to go. We're going to
incorporate one. Ask her to incorporate one actual 1990s thing. That'd be awesome.
And what would your pick be then, Allison? Would it be hammer pants? Is that what you're going to want? That's where you're going to go?
Actually, now I got to go through the catalog in my mind of all 90s things.
Virtual pets, Tamagotchis.
Oh, yeah. That
would be cool.
That would be pretty cool. And Furbies. Everybody has a Tamagotchi and a Furby. Remember how annoying the
Furbies were evil. I literally had one wake up on me when it was not supposed to be awake.
I worked at a Radio Shack around that time when the Furbies came out. And we were all so excited when we got them. We were like, this thing sounds like it has like it's like built out of just like a bunch of gears. Like if they made this thing steampunk, it'd be cool because it sounds like it should be steampunk. It's like, that's gonna sound terrible. I'm gonna lower the volume on that. I apologize to everybody's ears. But all right. So anyway, so yeah, we've been talking about that. That's going to be the next series that Jill's going to work on because once book 6 in Perilous Alliance comes out, those folks are going to get a little bit of a pause for a while. So we've been planning that out, and we planned out book 6 as well. What's going to happen in the next book for Perilous Alliance? So that was cool. And then right after that is the week after that's going to be Tyr, which Jenny has delivered unto me for my final ministrations.
I just got used to calling it Tyre again. Now you're calling it Tyr.
You were the one that said you want to call it Tyr. I'm calling it Tyr. I can't help it.
I just wrapped my head around Tyre.
We talked about this last week.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to screw it up forever. That's what we're looking at here. You'll pick one, and I'll start calling it the other one because I'll be lagging behind. Yeah, so that's going to be coming out, and then the following week is just trying to do math in my head here quickly. Is going to be the next book in Perseus Gate, and if by some miracle I couldn't double check that because I feel like I'm wrong. By some miracle I managed to finish the Empire, that will be coming out as well. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I missed Rika. Rika's in the middle of all that too.
In there.
Yeah, in fact, Rika comes out before Tyr/Tyre. So yeah.
No slashing of tires around here, please.
That's right. Yeah, no slashing of tires. So, and then following that, we've got Vesta Burning, which is the next book that follows Lyssa. It's sort of an interim story between the Sentience Wars origins and the major stuff that happens after that. I've got my screen now, so I'm cheating. And then Tau Ceti, which Lisa's been slaving away on, and I'm looking forward to because I think she's got some pretty cool ideas in there. And then believe it or not, even though Precipice of Darkness just came out, the book after Tau Ceti is going to be Aerith Ascendancy, the next Orion War book. And then following that, we task Killshot. So there's just stuff coming. In fact, pardon me. I think excepting 1 week, there's going to be a book coming out every week until December 27th.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's going to be, yeah. And Jen McDonald, the editor, and not Jenny, we've been talking about like what her schedule's going to look like. And she was looking for a bottle of wine or beer or vodka or something, I think, as we were discussing that.
Tequila,
right. That's right. That's what you drink.
Take care of yourself, Jen. Take care of your mental capacities.
No.
Don't let Michael drive you to drink.
Relaxation.
That's why I just give her fun stuff like this Rika story she's going to do today for Bob's Bar. Hopefully you're going to find it to be enjoyable, not stupid. But I find if I put characters in strange costumes, Jen always loves it. So it's like her favorite thing. If the future just could be one giant Halloween costume party, she'd be perfectly happy.
Maybe. There
Maybe.
needs to be some other stuff in there. But
Oh, right. Yeah. Interspersed with bad sweater Christmas parties. There you go.
Bad sweater Christmas parties.
Hey, bad sweater Halloween parties are starting to be a thing too.
Are you serious? Let's do
Yeah.
Easter next.
Because people are too lazy to costume that.
What was that, Jen?
I said people just want excuses to wear ugly sweaters. Those
Yeah.
are around.
Yeah.
Especially in Portland.
I've never had the compulsion to purposely wear anything ugly.
No, me either.
I've got an ugly Star Wars T-shirt. It's a Star Wars Christmas T-shirt, so I wear that to ugly sweater parties. I should make an Aeon 14 one. That'd be kind of funny. Your ugly Aeon 14 T-shirt. Now Jen has a compulsion to wear something ugly. I think I'm done. That's everything I got.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right.
no, it's not everything I got. All of Lissa is now available on audio as well. So,
Oh yeah.
So that happened just
Cool.
2 weeks ago. So the
They
entire
kind of snuck it in on us. It's just
yeah, James noticed before I even got the email saying it was out. I don't know how that happened. It's like you just like refreshing Audible like every 5 minutes. For like,
I look at it, and it had been up, so I was like wondering when it was going to go live for order, and then I happened to.
and then it just I don't get notified. So I have a publisher called Tantor does the Orion War books, and they don't tell me when they put things up for pre-order just because that's more fun that way. So I discovered that War in 1,000 Fronts is coming out on audio September 26th. So that's right around the corner too. And then with any luck, ACX and Audible will approve Last Bastion of Star City and Rika Triumphant pretty soon too. So we could have a whole bunch of audio coming out the next couple of weeks.
I mean, maybe sometime we'll talk about publishing, but honestly, working for Michael helps me like satisfy my obsessions about data when it comes to publishing. So I'm both not doing it myself because it's really easy to be totally obsessive about all these things.
No kidding.
But I have a person that understands and provides the information. So it's not like, yeah, we'll give you that in the quarterly report, or we might get around to that, or they might, it's it works. It works.
Yeah, it's a lot more sane.
Yeah.
You can lose yourself in that stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. Do we have any Patreon updates? I think didn't a bunch of backgrounds hit Patreon?
Yeah, I put a bunch of new backgrounds up. I should do another round again soon. And then also anybody who's on Patreon can get a Rika story that is going to come out in an anthology in a while, but right now is only available on Patreon. So even $1 subscribers can get access to that. And that's a story that actually follows shortly after Rika mechanized. So what happens after the mission that occurred at Rika mechanized, and what Rika and Silva go through next. And then very soon, Bob's Bar will be coming out. I don't have a date for that yet, but that'll actually have Rika in it as well. And that's the thing that Jen's going to be looking at shortly.
And that's an anthology that includes like a bunch of people, right? Michael Anderle.
Yeah, I think this one's going to have Lindsay Baroker, Jay Allen, Barry Hutchinson, Andrew Dobell, Craig Martell, Michael Anderle, and Jonathan Brazzi. And maybe one other person might be in there as well. It's got a pretty big group. And so the cool thing about that is like most of the time when you get an anthology, it's just a bunch of separate stories. But the Bob's Bar stories, and you can get the first one. It's out there still. It's 99 cents. The Bob's Bar stories are all of our characters show up at this bar somewhere at the corner, in the back corner of the multiverse, and swap stories. So it's actually so in the first one, it's Tanis telling a story, and with Angela chiming in. And the second one is going to be Rika telling a story of something that happened. And the Tanis one's pretty awesome too. If you guys like Cheeky, it's a story about Tanis and Cheeky having an outing way back when they first met that they didn't share with anybody else. And because Tanis is just all about tactics, it involves the tactical use of a nymphomaniac.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, right? You got like Tanis is like, I got what's my available weapon? I've got a nymphomaniac here. I'm just going to use her on whatever I need. So.
Yep.
I feel like I've done that story already. Did I?
Well, yeah, you edited that story.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, that sounds familiar. Why does that sound familiar? I mean, how many stories do I edit with a nymphomaniac? I mean, not many.
It's true. It is a little bit of an uncommon thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what's going on there too.
I was trying to think of like a really uptight, like that was a Jane Austen story. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's a long
Christie
time.
wrote that one,
Wuthering
right? Nymphomaniac on the Orient Express.
Right. When did the word nymphomaniac even enter the lexicon?
Dear Lady Dobby.
I have no idea. Now I kind of want to find out.
Meet me in the barn. And I'm
Often
done.
in the life of a young lady, she finds herself.
In need of a lover.
Right. Okay, so living in the future.
Yeah, moving on.
I know. Trying to avoid awkward pauses.
Yeah.
This is kind of a huge subject. I think it's something that we could come back to, but it does really fascinate me, the kind of anthropological, social aspects, because we live in a time of constant change, and I think it's even hard for us personally to pin down sometimes the effects of the technology that we live with. And I think everybody's enamored of the idea of multiverses right now, like Bob's Bar, but I think that's a symptom of the fact that everything we do is a choice. Every computer system or app or new job becomes, it could go one way or another, right? Is Instagram going to survive? Is it going to die? Like, what if MySpace had survived and Facebook had been the one that died? What if we were all on Friendster still, and they were directing the courses of our social interactions? And it's like comforting, I think, to think that there could be other options out there where it's okay and we're not stuck with this timeline. So when we think about things in the future, it's really difficult to really pin that down sometimes, and we have to kind of base it on the information that we have now, right? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could disagree with me, but I think that's why I find this aspect in particular of hard science fiction something that's really fun to think about, and I really enjoy the world building aspects where if we pin it on something, like everybody's going to learn, like there are no teachers. All we have is a database, like an advanced Wikipedia. And so it actually falls on parents who are trying to run a space freighter, out in the depths of space to teach their children, like, what does that look like? Or versus what you might get on a highly advanced, place like Hytera, where we have maybe virtual realities and the opportunity to teach people, through experiences, versus now you're 20 and you have a link and you have access to all of this information, but then how do you sort through the information to decide what you need and what you don't, and do you hang on to it or you just let it go as soon as you no longer need that thing and then move on to the next? Are we highly compartmentalized, which I see us doing now. Even like I don't hang on information as much as I used to. I just Google it, when I need it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I thought that I might start the conversation there, maybe starting with if folks have thought about this. I mean, I think I've done a lot of adult education. And I think, who else had said they've done education in their life? Or
I used to teach.
Lisa?
I taught for about 15 years.
What age group did you teach?
I was teaching adults.
Adults,
like
yeah.
16 and older.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I also had, 3 kids go through education in different countries as well. So I've been able to compare the different teaching styles, different styles of education. It's very interesting. One thing I would say is that I think we're going to lose classrooms.
Uh-huh.
Within the next 50 years or so, we'll probably start to see a lot of kids doing learning outside of the classroom, like at home and out in workplaces and different venues as well, because they won't need to come together to learn so much anymore. And also, I think the entire need for education is changing, because we originally needed mass education. It was brought in because we needed people to be able to go to work in factories. We needed to teach people to teach children, basically, to get up at a certain time and line up and do tasks in order. And of course, now with automation, that's totally going to be useless now. You don't need kids to get up all at the same time and go to the same place. I think we're going to face some challenges, really, about what do we do when there's no retail work because it's all automated. There's no manufacturing work because it's all automated. So I think that's really going to change education styles, so that kids are more going into personal services and creative pursuits and technology, learning about technology. I think it's going to become very, very differentiated to that. Like in a place like, I mean, I had this conversation with Michael when we were first talking about writing the Building New Canaan series books, is what would that actually look like? I think you had some very interesting things to say about the brain augmentation and how that would affect their learning. Is that right?
Yeah. Are you segueing into me now,
Yeah,
Jenny?
yeah. I can't quite remember what it was that you were saying.
So what I was, I think what you're referring to is, I was thinking about back when I first started writing about things like the link and about how people would take information into their minds. I did a lot of research on what the brain does and what it's for, and we've touched on this a little bit. We talk about intelligence on the other podcasts. A creature's ability to be intelligent and to think about things other than just survival has a lot to do with the size of their brain in relation to the size of their body. For most animals, the vast majority of their brain functions around keeping their body intact. Like a cat's brain is the size of a peanut, and pretty much the whole thing is working on keeping that body going. Whereas a human, we have lots and lots of extra brain space for things that are not directly tied to our body. We have, like, for example, we have our lizard brain, or reptile brain. I can't remember what it's called. I always call it the wrong thing, and someone corrects me. Which looks, it looks shockingly like it basically looks exactly like a frog's brain, which is why they call it that. And it sits right underneath what we typically consider to be the brain. It's like these two little nodes and this sort of long thing and whatnot. And pretty much that thing is capable of running our whole body, if necessary. And everything else is capable of actually doing higher thought. Now, we've actually got some funny things because there's actually a whole bunch of our parts of our brain that do double duty. And that's sometimes why we seem to have conflicting thoughts, because parts of our lizard brain control certain types of reactions and things, and we also have higher cognitive powers in other parts of our brain that control reactions, and they conflict with one another quite a bit, which is why we feel conflicted when certain things happen. But what there isn't in our brain is there isn't a part of our brain for directly assimilating information over the internet. It has to go through our eyes, it has to go through our ears, it has to go through our nose or a sense of touch. Like, that's how information comes into the brain, and there are parts of the brain that are dedicated to doing these things, and there's no part that is dedicated to accessing information directly over the link. So in Aeon 14, and it's not really ever called up, but some people only have visual overlays. Like, for example, well, actually it is with Reese, for example. Reese only has visual overlays. She can only take information in through her eyes, and she has auditory implants in her ears for taking information in that way. But she can't directly assimilate information to her brain. Tanis, on the other hand, has parts of her brain that are completely dedicated to directly assimilating information over the link. And so I think that would affect a lot how you would raise children, and whether or not these children, and how you would educate children, whether or not these children have that kind of brain augmentation or not. I think would play a big part in all of that. So if you had, and I think for children to be able to have direct link access, they would actually have to be born that way. You would actually they would have to come out of the womb with parts of their brains that are dedicated to that particular task, which means their brains are denser, and actually would probably have more folds than our brains do. But I still feel.
But what would that do to the development of the rest of the brain? I mean, some of the things that we're finding out now, some of the newer technologies are negatively impacting how the brain is developed in children. Well, so how would something like that?
I think luckily in Tanis's time, they would have a lot of that stuff licked. In the interim years, they might make some terrible mistakes. Mm-hmm. Which is one of the reasons why I first started writing it. I jumped past all of that to the point where we'd figured all that stuff out. Because I mean, some of those stories are interesting, but it wasn't the story I wanted to write then. I wanted to write the story where we figured all that out. Yeah. Especially because I'm not a big fan of dystopian myself. I don't really find that storyline to be interesting personally. So I didn't want to write about it too much. Although I think in the meantime, I figured out ways where I could find it enjoyable. But I think that, initially I think you would probably end up with scenarios where people were missing empathy, or they were missing certain motor skills even, or they could possibly, because if you're spending all of your time interacting virtually over the link with people, you might actually have very poor motor skills, and those parts of your brain may not develop at all. Or maybe they even become subsumed by your brain using that brain space for other things, because that happens,
We've got problems right now with with certain spatial cognition that has not been developed.
Yeah.
We've got, people are so used to, we've got an entire generation that has now been raised on, Siri, how do I get to X, Y, Z?
Mhm.
And they do not. They've done a 2013 study, looked at the spatial cognition of children and how they develop, and how having a phone to tell them where to go and not using maps actually negatively impacts their development
I would
in
believe
that
it, yeah.
way, and how they relate to the world spatially. And we're now, we have the first generation of pilots now who we are calling green line pilots that are awful because they do not know how to navigate. Oh, they do.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's gonna be
we call them
especially-
green line pilots.
What is
Well, I
green? What
think-
do you call them? Green line. What does that mean?
They're following the green
They're
line.
following a green line.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I mean, one of the challenges is that we can't see the future, obviously, right? So we're in a transitional phase, and we using the criteria of the past, we see that as being negative. But maybe from the criteria of the future, we're in a transition point to another way of seeing that.
Well, it creates a lot of risk though, because if you have people who can't function without
losing, and the brain is losing the ability to do something, which is concerning to me.
Well, I would imagine though that you could probably have seen the same sort of thing in folks who, who grew up in certain scenarios where they lived in a valley where their farm was, and they never went over those hills.
Right.
They spent their entire lives. So I suspect things like that might
still
happen.
understand the concept of spatial awareness.
Because before that, we were nomadic, and you definitely had to have a concept of that, or you died.
Well, some people were, but some people weren't. I mean,
and others couldn't even leave their village for their whole life.
There's a lot of people that were nomadic. I mean, that's how we made our way across the seas and the straits and and seafaring navigation became a whole thing, and that you needed spatial awareness. I mean, I still don't know how to use those compasses and things, but the weird, what they call it, septance and stuff. No one knows how to use that anymore because we have digital.
No one knows how to tell time by the stars anymore.
We'd all be screwed.
No, it doesn't take that hard to tell time by the stars, Lisa. You just have to understand what time of year it is and see when it comes up. And
no, you can use the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and you can actually tell time by the stars.
Depending on if you know where they should be in the seasons, yeah. Or if you live south of the equator, you're not using the Big Dipper.
That's true. That's true.
This is stuff that people I know don't know.
Well, so, of course, to James's point, what value does being able to tell the time by the stars offer? The answer is none. It's right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But what value does?
Oh, go ahead.
What value does retaining information? James, you said that you Google stuff now. You just don't keep it inside your brain anymore. How does that impact the way our brains develop as we age? Alzheimer's, dementia. How do you, keeping the brain elastic, keeping the brain working, the ability to remember, to consciously access old memories, and to just it's like a muscle that, you don't want to lose that capability.
I was just thinking of something that we used to do. So I worked with the Patriot Air Defense System, which is a missile system that Patriot needs to know where it is on the Earth in order to be able to send the missiles where they need to go, right? So we used to just do that with GPS, which even back then GPS was this whole rigmarole that it's not today. But we would always train. I had to look up the word with a surveying. I just thought of it as a surveying tool, but it's actually called a theodolite to emplace each of the launchers in relation to the radar. And that was basically using a sextant to emplace the weapon system. And it was such a pain in the rear to do that. And if we'll that because it's a headache. But that was like a transition point between technologies, right? And how irritating it is to go back to the technology that will do the job, but takes so much time versus just pushing the button and making it work. And even though conceptually why the other thing works, quite honestly, I never felt that it was as exact as using the GPS. And I wonder if your green line pilots are in that transition point as well, as having a hard time of okay, I could kind of do this in my mind, but I know the GPS is correct, so should I trust it? And we're asking them to trust technology, right? With everything else.
Yeah, and when it fails.
Right.
how do how do you navigate? I mean, I learned pilotage.
Yeah.
And to be able to look down and to be able to know, to be able to read a map, or we call them sectionals.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to read a sectional.
They're complicated. Those things are nuts.
Lots of symbols.
Lots of symbols. I think.
Granted, ground navigation seems like a pretty basic skill necessary to pilot an aircraft, but that is really we're in that point.
I think what will happen is we're going to see a lot of people that. Well, it just sort of depends on their environment. A lot of these people that don't know how to do these things that we consider to be important, for them, it's about as useful as cursive writing to know how to read a map. And if our civilization continues to progress at a steady rate, it may never be useful. What we all sort of worry is what happens if the power goes out. And I think possibly the way the future ends up going could have to do with, like, does the power go out? And I'm talking about like some sort of global event where we all lose power, coronal mass ejection wipes out all of our satellites. And we realize that it's actually fairly important for humans to understand how to operate without all of this technology. And we make sure that our educational system keeps that going. And then, of course, we tend to be lazy and constantly seek the route of the easiest route. So it may be it'll go through waves. There'll be some sort of terrible event. We all realize that, everybody should figure out how to do math in their head again. But then it'll fade, But then, of course, what will increasing lifespans do in that scenario as well? Because we are going to have increasing lifespans. I mean, people think about the lifespans I've listed in Aeon 14 as being ridiculous. And to be honest, the big hand wave in Aeon 14 is that eventually I still have us dying. And I don't think that's going to happen, actually. I think we're going to hit a point before too long where people don't die anymore. And then you sort of run to, like, what do you remember? What do you not remember? And how hard is it to bring back skill sets if you need to?
Well, you'd like to think that skill sets would be transitional. Like, I'm just thinking about the maps, and okay, I'm not conceptualizing a map, right? I'm not looking at a topographic map and making that conceptual leap in my mind to, map the Earth or whatever. But I am navigating from Facebook pages and linking, social information among people, and being able to navigate Amazon and search for information on Amazon for that thing I want to purchase. And that's still a conceptual linkage in my mind that might be using the same kind of skills. It's
kind of seeing in the mind's eye.
Yeah, it's just not.
It's a different kind of spatial skill.
Yeah, and that's what I wonder. Like, we think of these things as being lost, but maybe it's just the fact that we just don't use it. So we're compartmentalizing these various skills.
I think the concept of picturing the location of object, their shapes, their relationship to other shapes, and in relation to their position in different places, I think that kind of transcends the map.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that kids learn when they're very, very young as well. I think it's like speech, that if that's something that they miss out on, teachers can tell often when kids are doing gym at school if their parents have played with them or not, if they've played ball with them or not, because they lack awareness that Lisa's talking about. And it could be that we have like a learning window, that once you get to 11, 12 years old, you've actually missed that phase where your brain could develop that skill. And for that reason, I think that early childhood education probably actually won't change very much, that we will still be getting young kids together to play and to just interact.
Right.
And because that's
I
don't think that they could be born with. Apparently, when a newborn baby, when a baby is born, its brain is like mucus. It's so soft and unformed, and it's only when the baby hears, sees, moves, and starts to learn,
it imprints.
That its folds develop.
That's what starts to develop the folds and everything.
Right.
Sorry?
It begins imprinting.
When you're first born, your brain is very smooth. And because the interesting thing is your neurons only exist on the surface. So it's actually the folds of the fact your brain folds that gives you more surface area. The human brain is actually just a giant flat thing.
Mm-hmm.
by and large.
Right.
And yeah, but when you're first born, there's no folds. It's just flat.
Right. Right.
And there's been some unfortunate scenarios where kids were raised, there was actually a child that was raised with wolves. And this child's brain only exists around the surface of their skull. The inside of the skull is just a watery pocket that has no brain in it. So there's,
and you can see, like, they've compared the brains of children who have suffered severe neglect with children who have normal childhoods when they're about 2 years old, and they're very, very different.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to keep kids just playing. I think that's probably won't ever change. Because
let me ask you this though, Jenny. I mean, and maybe from your perspective with different cultures. I mean, now that I have a 16-year-old and now I have a 4-month-old, and it feels like there's definitely it's effort to go interact with other parents and even kids. And there's like this, like if you wanted to, you could sequester. The government is creating systems where you could pretty much sequester your child for their entire life if you want to, if you're afraid of the world, and through various types of schooling that are available. And it feels like more we're being pushed away. And we don't have to get into this, but people are being encouraged almost because this creates separate little consumers. If we separate people out. But I wonder about that. I wonder if it's going to. Have you seen that culturally where maybe it feels like it's that way in American culture where you don't want to let your kids near other kids because they'll make your kids sick or they'll hurt your kid or all these other things out there that you're the only person that can keep your kids safe.
I think there's definitely a big move towards home education. Like the Chinese system is very, it's quite old-fashioned and quite a lot of it's still based on rote learning and memorization and so on. So I think that's part of how it's changing, is that it's becoming more individualistic because parents are keeping the kids at home. But here, anyway, it's more to do with they don't want that traditional educational style rather than they don't want to have their kids mixing with kids whose ideas they don't agree with. Yeah.
So there's a political aspect.
Yeah, I would say so. But I think it's not part of a general movement of education is just becoming more and more and more differentiated. Like I was looking into where my son will go when we go back to the UK because he's 16 now, and in the UK you have to stay in education until you're 18. But there's a huge range of choices of things that he could do when he's 16. They even have specialised schools, they call them studio schools, where you can study a particular field. So, for example, there's a space school. If you're interested in space, in aeronautics, you can go to space school when you're 16.
We have something similar called a charter system. Yeah.
So I think that is how it's going to go. I think there's so much that kids can learn, and professions are becoming so highly specialised because we're moving away from the raw labour field. We don't need it because we have automation. That in order to go into those careers, they're going to have to start learning about them when they're really quite young.
That's what I think. Being in such a transitional phase right now, like the most important thing you can learn is how to learn, because I was trying to explain this to my son last night. We started going to college prep classes and things, and they're still so focused on the idea of what major you're going to do and what job you're going to have. And I'm like, it's entirely, you will have at least 2 to 3 jobs in your lifetime, so your ability to navigate different roles and interact with people and solve problems is so much more important than learning to be an accountant. Those are skills you can learn, but how you apply those skills, because one aspect of education I think that is never going to go away is the problem solving aspect. Like we are trying to solve the problems of living, right? And so education will hopefully move to address that. If it doesn't, I guess robots will do it for us. But
I like that phrase, learning how to learn. That's one of the most important things a child can be taught, is how to access information and to learn.
Well, and it seems that's one of the problems of our
That's-
time
Why
right
that
now. It's how to process information. And we were hanging out with some friends that I felt kind of bad for her because her daughter was 12, and she was actually a little obsessive about it, like talking about how if I'm going to read a news story, I'm going to verify it in 3 different places, and I'm going to get 3 different
The
opinions.
12-year-old?
Yeah, and she was, but that's what she had to, that's what she was being taught to do in order to verify that information was correct.
It's going to be really important in the future, actually.
Yeah, that's the world that she's navigating into. Whereas,
A lot of
we would just go to
misinformation.
at least me, when I was a kid, 12, I would just go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, right, which was a database that hadn't changed in 20 years, but I supposedly could trust that database was correct.
Right.
Now there's so much junk on the internet. Like the 12-year-old that I have most of my interactions with, she will believe anything that she reads or hears or sees on the internet. So a lot of the time her dad and I are like trying to debunk the information that she's giving us, and we're like, no, that's not right, because this and this.
Just go edit a Wikipedia page on her.
Research skills are so important.
I've done that to people, by the way. I've just gone and live edited a Wikipedia page and like, okay, now the truth has changed.
Yeah.
But I worry about her ability to like navigate in the world when so many people are not out for the truth necessarily,
I think that eventually, I was thinking about this, we were talking, some things we were talking about before. I think eventually there's going to have to become some new measures of truth. Maybe not stuff like Snopes, because I feel like Snopes actually only has very recently started disclosing who actually worked on articles, which has bothered me for some time. But something like Snopes that's a little bit more transparent, that you can like trust. Of course, you always, who watches The Watchmen is always the question, and there's no solution for that. There's just maybe multiple versions of Snopes that all just stare at each other and hopefully aren't in collusion. So hopefully that's how we're going to have to tell the truth is. But you can imagine a time like in the future, for example, like so much of what we believe is what we see. But if you think about it, you get some ocular mods on your eyes. You can't trust what you see anymore. Reality can be your perception of reality can be changed underneath you very easily. And so you'd end up with scenarios where you'd actually almost have to like have some sort of way to buy trust from some company that can like say like, okay, we verify that your eyes actually do show the real world as it's intended to be. There's a little bit of this in the Proteus Bridge, where when Starl got his mod, it was actually like showing him ads and stuff like that over top of his vision. And I've mentioned this a couple of times too, like where people are walking through corridors and how the corridors are technically empty, but they see things everywhere because their augmented reality that they live in is doing that to them all the time.
Right.
So you probably have a lot of skills based around understanding what is truth, or at least certainly deciding that there's people you're going to trust that are actually going to tell you the truth. I do think we were talking a little bit. What was that?
Truth sponsors.
There you go. Yeah, something like that. We were also talking about, you guys talking about how we're going to, like how we educate children now and the things that we find to be important and things that are no longer being taught because we don't find that they're important, things like play and whatnot. And the interesting thing is that the reason why everything that we have now exists is because it was successful. And that's what we raise our children a certain way because it was successful. And in theory, there were people that didn't raise their children this way and they died off. And actually, you want to look at a lot of examples of that. You can just look at the early colonial efforts in the United States, in the Americas. The people that survived were the ones that did the successful things, and people that tried other things that weren't successful all died off. So in theory, as we continue to change the way that we raise children and educate children and whatnot, one could assume that the successful methods will work and the unsuccessful ones won't, and we'll sort of weed them out. And now, that probably means that there are going to be segments of the population and maybe even generations that are just complete failures. Hopefully, the real question is how quickly can we respond to those mistakes and correct them? But the interesting thing is, like you're saying, James, like anyone who's in their early 20s and listening to this right now, you're going to have 5 major career changes in your life, especially because you're going to live longer. Like right now, anybody who was born in the 1970s in the first world nation stands a pretty good chance of living to be 120. That's what the UN's estimations are right now for life expectancy. There are certain people right now that believe that if you can make it to 2050, you should probably be able to live to 300. And if you can survive those 300 years, you'll probably become immortal, or there'll be no reason why you're going to die from natural causes. Because that's the rate at which technology is advancing as far as dealing with aging. So then you wonder, what do you even teach kids at a young age? Like, or do you just let people have like 50-year childhoods or something like that, where they have like no responsibilities? Or do you teach just super basic things and get really good at discovering aptitude and direct people down certain paths? So you know what, you are really creative and you love to draw. We're just going to start to teach you how to draw, and you can just be an artist for like 30 or 40 years until you get bored of it and you want to do something else. And then you can learn how to be a plumber, you know, or whatever strikes your fancy.
I think, first of all, I think some people already have 50-year childhoods. Peter Pan syndrome, that is a thing.
I think it'll become more common, though. It could become a point where everybody could have one and there'd be no disadvantage.
But I also think that one of the things that I think the younger generations are going to struggle with is like isolation. Mm-hmm. They're being taught specific things, right? And so they're their parents don't want them playing with kids whose parents have different values. Right. How are those people going to learn how to work together to solve problems if they haven't been communicating from a young age? Yep. I mean, there are adults that can't have intelligent discourse over issues because they disagree on them and they haven't figured out how to push through that disagreement to actually like stick to the problem. It all gets personal very quickly and dirty. Yeah. And so I think
those are examples.
What?
I said, and those are America's examples.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, one of the things that would be really important to teach the younger ages, even, you know, as we get longer life expectancy, is like just interaction on a social level, you know, like even if it's playing, because there's a lot of problem solving in playing, you know, but just being around other people and learning how to be around other people.
That's why I think, I mean, even in the future, like in the far future and stuff, I think school will probably, for that reason, will probably always be held in a social, like they get up at the same time and they go to the same place, because more and more education seems to be learning things, and what they learn and what they need to learn is going to change as the world changes, as we explore the galaxy and that kind of stuff. But I think there will always be a push to always keep school in a social setting, because you need to understand how to communicate with people you don't agree with. I mean, even in reference a book, in The Last Bastion, when they went into the dream, and Jessica, sorry if you haven't read this one, but it's an old one. They had their children
Spoilers.
go to school. I mean, the children went to school to get to know the people that were in that city, and to know what, you know, to know what society is. I mean, you have to know what society is. So I think school will probably always, if possible, be kept in a social setting. Also, if you think about it, all the fun things that come along with school, you know, it's not always just about the education. It's, you know, it's like school dances, and I mean, and it's a bonding. And even in the future, people have a tendency to want to group together, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like we have Team Hammerfall. I mean, they want to group together, you know, and people will probably always be that way. The homeschooling thing, and where I live, I don't see a lot of that at all.
We have a lot of it in Oregon.
I think it has to do with, one of the reasons is, hopefully people aren't keeping their kids at home because they don't want them interacting with other people who don't believe the same thing they do, because that's just going to breed intolerance. But and hopefully people are teaching their children to accept and, you know, learn to live together even if you don't believe the same thing. But I can't say that's what's happening. But I do know that if someone where I live is homeschooling, it's most likely because they don't live in a school district that they feel comfortable sending their children into. Yeah.
We have a combination
in the future that may just be like homeschooling. I think if you're on planet, you probably would do it in a social sense, because the social interaction is so important. It develops your brain, like they were saying. I think the only way you would do like a homeschooling situation is if either
like on the sunny skies
planets, or, you know, as we expand the stars, there's not the opportunity, you know. But I think if you're on one of the more advanced planets that are very settled, I think they probably will still do school in a in a social setting, because social aspects are so incredibly important. Otherwise we're not really human anymore.
There's a couple, and that's a great question. So how do we, we define human in a certain way, and then 300 years from now, how are they thinking of human?
Also true.
Also, I wanted to touch on a couple things you just said, because at least here in Oregon, we have like homeschooling. There's the stereotype is that it tends to be, religious and focused on certain religions. But I've talked with other parents that are considering homeschooling that wouldn't have, because they fear for their children's safety. And
that's also true. The school district, they don't want to. Yeah.
Schools are a focal point for violence and have been. We look at. We don't need to go down this path, but school violence goes back a lot farther than we think of currently. Like, I think one of the first incidents of school violence was actually in the 1700s, because any place where you bring so many people that are important in the community together in one place draw attention. So that's one thing that could be, a reason to decentralize schools and go away from the concept of the classroom. But I think that extends to a lot of other places than just school. Like, we're seeing, any business that depends on drawing a lot of people together into one place is like rethinking how they're doing that in some ways. But one thing I wanted to touch on was the economics of this, where I think that classes with resources, classes with, the money may not do that social level of learning. Whereas if it's state supplied or government supplied, they may always do that just because of the economy, and then technology comes into play because, Apple wants to get in there, Google wants to get in there, like whatever the tech is of the day. How do we touch the kids as soon as we can so we can get them bought into our tech, so they're addicted to it for the rest of their lives?
I know that here, there aren't a lot of bad school districts. And I'm just saying that just out of experience from just living from place to place and that kind of thing. But the thing that drives a good school district here is that the economy is good.
Right.
So if the economy is really good, then it goes back into the system, and my children do use technology in the classroom. They build schools now. They just built a school down my street where technology is integrated. They had to sign a waiver saying that they could bring tech home and from school. Like, it's kind of crazy. So they're integrating the tech, which I think obviously is going to happen. If you think about one of the first like Star Trek movies, the remake, the ones with the,
Chris Pine.
Thank you. I was about to say the hottie one. You know how the scene with Spock and he's in his little, divot thing and he's sitting there and that was school for them, but they were still together in a group, So I'm like, okay, so it could be that, but I feel like they'll still try and get together because that's how you get to know who that kid is. And like, how many people met their spouse like in college or something? It's a place to meet people. It's, school is.
That's a good point. It's one of the school is that social aspect of it. School is one of the last times that you're just kind of thrown into a group of people. And because once you leave school, that's so much harder to make those kind of relationships.
And you get all rigid in your head and, it's, I don't know.
As we live longer, how might that change?
Well, I think it's like when you go into a job where you do get the choice, relationships and jobs are largely discouraged, actually. So, So yeah, you're right. Yes. Yeah, for school, no one minds at all for having a relationship.
No one minds. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, as I'm like 36, and I'm thinking my college education, tons of fun. There's a lot of social aspects there, but I think my education was wasted on my youth. So I think people will continue to go back. They'll be like, gosh, if I could have done that, like, why not? Like, I've got 300 years to live. I don't want this job right now. I'm just going to go back. And there's going to be like different versions of education that continue. Because if you live that long, people never stop learning.
I think what you'll find is that the majority of people in some sort of specialized education will be older rather than younger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the majority of the population will be old.
Ever stop learning.
Yeah. I do think, by the way, that one of the things we didn't touch on as far as careers are concerned is that I don't think that you'll ever be able to get rid of trades.
I was going to say that too.
Like when you're, no matter how advanced your house is, when your toilet breaks,
I agree.
The bot is not going to be as good at fixing your broken toilet as a human would be, because your toilet's like, it's a weird one. It got put in a funny corner because someone wanted to do something different. The machine doesn't understand how to change that one out with a standard model. although some of that does come to spatial awareness, people are very good at figuring out how to, like, tweak knobs and get things into the right spot. Because we problem solve and we grow for life, whereas a non-sentient AI does not actually problem solve. They kind of do, but they don't do it the same way we do. They're not trying to find creative solutions. They're just trying to find solutions that match pre-existing programming. So I think, and even if you get to the point like how are you going to build a city? A machine would build a rather disgusting city. It would be, everything would be perfectly straight and whatnot, where we would look at the landscape and we say, like, how can we make something that looks nice and matches?
Beautiful architecture.
You could design a machine that would take all the design principles, and make supposedly a human concentric city or whatever focused city.
I don't believe that.
Oh, I think so. You can. We deal with that on, like, in my job all the time. Like, there are principles around how to do that. Well, I think the thing that you would lose is the character of the city.
Yes.
Or as humans come in, they would change it.
Yeah, you could certainly do something that would be nice and homogeneous, that could pull from the best practices of everything.
Right.
But all of our evidence that we have in the world today shows that if you do that, you get something crappy. There's no scenario where a committee designs something better than a singular person with vision. And the best example for that actually is Android versus Apple. Android is everything that a committee would decide that should go into your phone, and Apple is a singular vision of what a product could look like.
See, I'm so tired of Apple.
But
although if you look at the pure Android GUI, not all the stuff that
which is a singular vision type of scenario.
Yes. Which is what I use.
A better comparison would be back when Windows Mobile 6 was out and Apple came out. Windows Mobile 6 was a committee at Microsoft deciding all the best things you should want to have on your phone, and it was a highly functional operating system, actually. You could get a Palm Trio running Windows Mobile 6, and it was practically a computer in your hand 15 years ago. Apple came out with a phone that did far less, but it did less things, but it did them better, and it utterly destroyed the existing phone.
Well, Apple is better at selling you things, and that's why I was thinking back to the point about technology in schools. We were so happy to get a TRS-80 that we had 3 of them for like 100 kids, and now we're having to make very difficult decisions about what company do I want, stealing my child's eyeballs.
It's true.
And those are important questions.
With our schools, they bring their own.
Really?
Yeah, it's whatever they have at home. If they don't have one at home, they have.
No, what you're still looking at, Allison, is either are your kids bringing iPads or are they bringing Chromebooks?
iPads right now.
Right. Yes, that's what James is getting at. Is that? But
the point is that was my decision. Like as a parent, I still had.
You could have had them.
They could bring anything. Yeah.
Our schools.
In fact, my daughter wants a Chromebook.
You can't assume the kids can afford that. So that's like.
Well, that's true. And then there's kids who can't, and they have a system set up there, and that's when the school decides. And right now they're using Apple products. Uh-huh. So there's going to be one of those give and takes where the school district gets a deal, or whatever, they make a decision on what they think is a system that's best going to suit their needs for education. They chose Apple. My daughter right now has Apple, but if she was to get a Chromebook, she could still take the Chromebook to school, and it was still, because all Apple are now universal, she could still use it for everything.
So ours are more locked down network wise. So the
point is there's still a human choice there.
Yeah.
On education that way.
Our school doesn't. They have to bring Apple products because and we have to buy them.
Ugh.
Oh.
See, ours they bought them, but they're all completely managed by the school. So
we go to a private school, and the private school's like, if you can afford to go to a private school, and you can buy your own equipment.
Yeah.
No one goes to private schools where I live. That's probably the other thing.
Yeah, they're super common here. Although the funny thing is, Massachusetts has a great school system, and it's filled with private schools, and it's filled with homeschoolers. It's like we have
all the private schools here are awful. They're awful. Like a public school system is better than any private school around here because there's no pressing need for it for some reason. I live in I know it's something about the state, or I don't know, maybe I don't know, but I find that there's more need for private schools closer to the city center. Out in the suburbs, no one sends their kid to a private school.
I guess I went where I grew up. There were no private schools either, and there was no homeschooling.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah, and there was no homeschooling when I grew up either. And I went to a really bad school district when I grew up. Halfway through, and then I moved to a really good one, and then, that was hard.
So here's a question. How will things be better when they're completely individual driven because the quality of the school is only dependent on your desire to find the education?
Right.
Yeah.
And some parents are not driven enough to educate their children, I think, as well as a school district would, or a private school, or some sort of school setting. I know I, for one, don't think I have the discipline to homeschool my kids. So if I was trapped on a freighter with my kids,
Cake
Godspeed
every
to them,
day.
because
Well, luckily you'd have Alice, the virtual educator, that
Right.
I would have an AI to help me out. But I, if it was without that, I just would be.
But then you
Poor
get
kids.
then you get back to something that we discussed several podcasts ago, which was opportunity.
Mhm.
Everyone's going to have opportunity, but are they going to have the drive, or are they going to have the internal capability to,
Right.
and
Want to
constitution
learn.
and discipline to
Yeah.
take advantage of it?
Right.
And I think those things could still be a matter of class or station on what you even envision as your opportunity. Lisa, you had a story you wanted to share about education that I don't want to lose.
Actually, I did already. It
Yeah.
was the map.
Did you?
It
Oh,
was
it's the mapping. Okay.
it was the spatial cognition.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Dang it.
So I've done
Sorry?
one-on-one education in elementary school students, working with kids who were below their benchmarks in reading and writing and comprehension to try to bring them up to grade level and beyond. And these are kids that have behavioral disorders and learning disabilities and kind of the whole thing. And this was a very like low income school. A lot of these kids were living in multi-generational homes, like 8 people to a
Like
2-bedroom.
Allison's house.
No,
My house.
no,
Yeah.
no.
I know, I'm joking.
Kids.
I just like to make fun of the fact that Allison lived with like there's 4 generations.
4 generations, yeah.
There are 4 generations of women in my home.
Right.
Hey, that's
but
becoming
neither
very
of
normal
those women
That's a
have their own
in the
room or
US.
their own space.
Yes.
That's the
That's-
difference. Okay, so I was working with kids who did not have a great foundation that they were coming from. And so one of the things that was a common thread in this is how much TV was a part of their upbringing. Like that was the babysitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the parents
No,
are
I've
working
had
multiple
babysitter.
jobs or they're not around. And so, the kids plop down in front of the TV and they're entertained for 6-7 hours a day after school, right? And so it got to be that we were having to integrate screens into the way that we interacted with these kids because they didn't know how to handle the one-on-one personal, like face-to-face interaction.
They didn't know anything else.
The buffer of the screen, like thrown in.
Wow.
Huh.
And so we used like certain apps and stuff to help with them. And so we're trying to develop these skills. And it also became like a bonding experience because we're talking about the thing that they're interacting with. But it was like a tool, like the iPads were a tool to guide them to be able to interact. It was very interesting, very weird. And
Definitely think technology will be used in the future heavily.
Yeah.
I think humanity's issue is going to be how they can still remain like spatially aware and be able to do things without the technology always there. But even in the books, the technology is always there.
And that's the question. Should we do it without technology if it's always there? Like the whole thing about being raised by TV, like I watched a crap load of TV when I was a kid. Like that basically was my babysitter. I'd come home. And one of the reasons I love science fiction is because Star Trek and Buck Rogers were on KPTV 12 broadcast in Portland. And so cartoons, then Buck Rogers, then Star Trek, then Laverne and like life was, I mean, but you think about other things that's like supplying to a child's life, which is consistency and storytelling and all those other things they're kind of integrating. But who's controlling that? I don't have to get into that.
That's
But
going to be a futuristic political
yeah,
thing.
but what other, I think we think about technology and the fact that it is going to be there. So we're in a time where it is still hard to tell, like, is it good? Is it bad? We don't know, but it is the reality of what we live in. So I think Jen's story about trying to adapt to the way the child learns is actually really vital. And we might try and push kids to learn a certain way, and then realizing that we have to meet them where they're absorbing information is really vital.
It's already been proven that kids and adults even learn in extremely different ways. Like visually, audibly, that kind of stuff. Like Some children excel at certain subjects because it's taught in a way that they understand it better.
Oh, adults are selfish learners. They want to know
Well,
what's
that?
adults and the whole cognitive, like retaining stuff and Alzheimer's and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I don't think that's going to be a huge concern because there are multiple things that adults do for enjoyment that actually have a positive cognitive effect, and it keeps them. Studies are coming out now about all these things that we do on a daily basis for fun that we elect to do, like crossword puzzles and knitting and things like that, which I don't think are going to go away in the future because it's textile. It's stuff you do with your hands. It's stuff that it's crafts. I mean, crafts have never gone away. Fun. And then, like, we have apps coming out every day with adult coloring books now and all kinds of things. So basically, there's a part of our 50-year childhood here that doesn't want to go away because as adults, we need to de-stress. Like, the more life goes on, the more things that happen. We want to do things like this. It actually has a very positive cognitive development, and they're seeing a decrease in the chances of Alzheimer's in the future with people who do engage in activities like crossword puzzles, knitting, things like that have a repetitive and coloring, a repetitive sort of, you know what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Someone
we're trying to calm the noise down in our heads.
Well, the other thing too that you do is you think while you're doing these things.
Yeah, you think.
I think that's,
and it's also a repetitive thing, and it gives you some sort of it gives you an awareness, and it's like a brain exercise.
Well, what happens is the reptile part of your brain operates your hands, and the cognitive parts of your brain is actually freed up to think about stuff. And there's actually a lot more to it than that, obviously, but you are freeing up the processes to.
Yeah, but they're seeing many benefits of the things that grown-ups elect to do for fun.
Like I've been doing this thing in Minecraft for the last couple of years. I'm digging. I play Minecraft only in survival mode, so I can't it's not creative mode where you do what the heck you want. So I actually have to like mine my iron and make my pickaxes and then go dig my mines like that. And I'm actually working on building a road system across the entire world, which is harder now because when I started, it wasn't infinite. There was actually walls to the edge of where your Minecraft world was. So I've decided this is one land mass is where my roads are going to be built. So I've built mines. I've actually mined enough cobblestone to actually build roads across effectively the entire planet. And I'm still working on it. I'm building this inverted pyramid right now that's taken me months to dig out. But I actually do a lot of my really good plotting while I'm doing that. My little characters running on the screen with pickaxes, digging away at stone, and I'm plotting out the next book while I'm doing all of that. And thinking about stuff. Actually, I found it's the best way to listen to audio. That's my thing now. Whenever else there's me new audio, I fire up Minecraft and I'm sitting there mining while I'm listening to the story. To the point now where I feel like I need to be listening to Rika while I'm playing Minecraft.
That's what Philip does when he's editing. He does Minecraft and listens to the audio.
Yeah, it actually works really well. But I think that along those lines,
there's a precedent for that.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, people, you hear people say, "Oh, I get some of my best ideas in the shower." There's some sort of a noise kind of cancellation effect that happens that frees your brain to.
When I write books, I actually have the music on so loud that I can barely think. And sometimes I have multiple audio things going on at the same time when I'm writing. Sometimes I have the TV and music going. Yeah, that wasn't work for you, Allison. You're going to have a little more silence than that. But I was also going to say, one of the best pieces of silence. I think one of the best pieces.
The other day, and I say, I stay in a padded room all day.
By yourself. In the quiet, Well, listen,
and she talks to herself.
I know.
I talk to myself.
One of our best pieces of evidence for the fact that the humans are going to continue to want to have real experiences is the food industry.
Oh, yes.
It was 30 or 40 years ago, we could have all moved on to Soylent Green and had processed food delivered to our houses that we just sucked in and were perfectly happy with that. But we weren't. And we still crave a high-end, handcrafted food experience as much as we possibly can.
The trade thing, coming back to that.
So what?
That kind of ties in with the trades thing. There's going to be a need for, I want a human to have done this.
And I actually build custom tables, or I haven't in the last 2 years been writing so many of these darn books, but I used to build custom tables out of reclaimed wood. And people will pay a ton of money for a handcrafted custom table out of reclaimed wood. And what I discovered too is that they didn't want a perfect product. They actually wanted a product that looked like it was handmade. Like I did this one where I screwed up and I had my template flipped around that I'd made, and I drilled these dowel holes in the wrong spot. So I was building a wood that was made out of tables made out of maple and mahogany, and so the dowels were actually all mahogany into the maple legs, and so we had this cool purple and really blonde wood mixture going on. And I screwed up, so I put maple dowels in, and then I let them all dry, and I re-drilled the second spot over. So there was like, if you look carefully, you can see like there was half a maple dowel that had like another dowel going through it. And I apologized to the customer, and she said no, it was fantastic. She loved it because it proved that it was actually made by a person, and it was handmade. So
Yeah.
It's reassuring as writers that, because people will want books that are written by people,
not by AIs.
Not by, well,
AI. Yeah.
Oh, don't worry.
It's a creativity aspect that's needed.
Well, it's the same thing like when you saw, if you were to build a new city and you looked at the landscape, like James was saying, an AI could take all of the best practices and so on and so forth, and the things that are most appealing to the eye, and they could probably make a great looking city there. But a human would look at it and say, we're not going to move that hill because it just looks nice, and we're going to build things around that hill and whatnot, where the AI may not do that. I guess the question is whether or not it's better. Well, I guess it's sort of like a time.
What is better?
Scenario.
What is truth? What is beauty?
Yeah.
And we can't nail these things down.
Well,
The eye of the beholder.
I think the thing that you said that luckily will solve a lot of these problems is that the good things will be typically the good things are connected to the successful things. For example, if it turns out that flooding our bodies with carbs all the time is really, really bad, all the people that do that are going to die, and we're going to stop doing it. And we'll know it's not a good thing because it wasn't successful. And all the people that
It took us a long time.
Yeah, well, it's coming around a lot more quickly now that we understand.
There's all kinds of things. Well, that's another thing. Scientific advancement, the way they come out with information now and the things they discover. I was watching a program as an educational program. It was a Dino Dana that my daughter loves to watch. It's a dinosaur program.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all of these theories they have now about dinosaurs that they did not teach me. Okay? Because it wasn't available. And the way that they get information now, and then the channels it goes through. It used to be you had to send a paper, and now they can go back and forth, use technology. They talk to people. People talk so fast about theories, and they can go from one theory to another theory to another theory in a matter of months. And that's an interesting way that, like, technology being passed in education is that it moves so fast. One day they can think it's this, and then over the course of a couple of months, they'll be like, you know what? We're seeing evidence of this now. Like, I saw something where someone had hit upon a fungus they had found, and they think they may have figured out what happened in the Salem witch trials.
Mm-hmm.
That it may have been a fungal infection. And I'm like, whoa, that's decades. I mean, like, so long after that. But now when they make that connection, all of a sudden it just starts moving.
I mean, the peer review process can be gamed and has been gamed in academia, because certain types of research are incentivized over others, and so it becomes easier to see how that incentivization works because these ideas are moving so much more quickly.
They move so fast now.
So one thing I wanted to touch on, like Michael's idea of the fact that we're not going to die. Like I have tried to find this book forever, and I can't find it, but it was a biological philosophy about the idea that basically without death, like death is our evolutionary imperative, and if we don't die, we will no longer improve. That once we have passed on our not to basically that is the only way as a species we continue to improve, and once we cease to die, we will cease moving forward, because the incentive becomes to protect your individual life, right? And that's something I think that
doesn't mean we can't be killed.
What's that?
Doesn't mean we can't be killed.
You don't want to die, but then I guess I wonder like how that would separate.
We're talking about like natural aging, but you could still die in a horrible car crash.
Why would you do that if you are afraid of death? I mean, I guess that's where
what would happen is you'd end up with a subset of people that were so terrified that any action they take could end what would have been an eternal life.
Promise of eternal life. But then you'll also have another section. Like, I was watching Doctor Strange the other day because I love that movie, and there's that part where the guru she says death gives life meaning, and without well, it does. It gives life meaning. It's people are brought into the world and you feel something. People leave the world, you feel something, And when you know that your time is limited, it changes the way you live it.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I agree with James. If you've got 300 something years, like, how are you going to choose to live that? Like, are you going to stop growing? But at the same time, it's not immortality. Really, it's not, because you can still die. And there's going to be people that are going to be like, I'm done. You know, you're going to have those kind of people that are like, I'm done checking out. I don't want to live for 300 more years. You know?
Nihilists.
And then you'll have the
the other group.
Narcissists who want to spend 2 of the 300 years doing nothing but.
And then you'll have people that have lived like 400 years who think that they could become God. Like, you're going to have all kinds of, like, it's going to be a completely different human existence when you don't have, one day I'm just going to stop breathing. Because that's what happens now. One day you're just not going to be there anymore. You know, you don't know how it's going to happen, that kind of thing. But there still will be that small bit of thing where you still don't know if you are going to live to 500, because something could happen. You never know what's going to happen that day. That could take you.
It kind of depends on how safe your environment is. Like, if you're entering an environment that's so safe that you never have to worry.
If I'm running around like Jessica and Cheeky, I'm probably going to think about death a little more.
Yeah, they're facing death pretty regularly. But you think about like if I didn't know that I have at best 30 more years in these fingers, would I be writing as hard as I am right now? You know, if I had like 400 years, I might be lollygagging, you know?
Nah, not you.
Amazon
someone else, not you.
It's going to be a big problem, actually, if people don't have that sense that they have a finite lifespan.
Yep.
And maybe it will, as James says, just result in a kind of total stagnation and apathy. And that maybe, bringing it back around, that will be something that will be vital in education.
I think so.
I think that's why people will continue to go back to school. The education process won't ever stop. Humans like to learn.
To strive, to how to find meaning and purpose in their lives. Maybe that will be vital.
Makes you wonder how atrophy and entropy will play into that. Atrophy and entropy will play into that.
Yeah.
I'm tired, man. I'm too old for this shit. Can't deal with it.
So one of the things, I think this sort of ties into biology a little bit. Like, an interesting thing about human biology is all of us have traits in our bodies. We have DNA. We have that doesn't really do anything useful right now. But should certain scenarios arise, it could do something useful. Like, say for example, we all have pale skin here. Chances are that 2,000 years ago, our direct ancestors did not. At one point, everybody in the world had black skin. And it only takes 2,000 years for a complete pigmentation change in a direct ancestral line. So it's entirely possible that folks that have dark skin now used to have light skin, and people that have light skin now used to have dark skin. And all of us have dark skinned ancestors because of just simply where they were, because of they didn't need adaptive melanonin when they all lived in Africa. You just wanted it all the time. And so but that trait exists in our bodies right now. It's just not useful given our current living situation. Adaptive melanonin is far better, because if we were dark skinned and we lived further north, we would have vitamin D deficiencies and we'd all be sad in the wintertime. And so there's lots of things like that in our bodies. There's lots of traits that could deal with certain diseases that have come up in the past, diseases that the human race hasn't seen in 500,000 years. There's still coding in our bodies to defend against those diseases. And if you were to sort of homogenize everything, we'd be screwed when the next thing showed up that we couldn't deal with, or when something came back. A bunch of Antarctic ice melts, a bunch of bacteria that hasn't been around for 500,000 years comes out, and anybody that doesn't have the resistance to that is going to be toast. And if we're not cautious with how we do genetic work in the future, we could create those problems. But I think the same thing will happen with education. Even now, like, we don't educate the same on our small one planet. And as humanity expands, it's going to become even more differentiated. There's going to be people that are going to have lots and lots of different ways of educating their children and whatnot. And the ones that aren't as diverse are going to fail, because when they run into the first thing that they didn't plan for, they're going to be toast. So I kind of feel like by Tanis's time, at least, they're going to have a pretty good idea of what doesn't work, because all the people that did stupid shit died out. You know, the people that didn't instill wanderlust into their kids, they just went into the webs and their brains turned back into jelly again, or they just eventually all off themselves because there was no point living anymore. They didn't have like any drive. They didn't have things they wanted to do. So I think that right now we only view our current situation as successful because it's the only successful one we know. But I kind of hope that as things go on, we're gonna make sure that we're gonna hopefully the successful thing continues to be a social human species that likes to hang out together and not like
they'll end up like the dreamers.
Yeah. Well, but they're social too, ironically.
They were until they created their utopia where there was no more drive, and so therefore.
Well, they all ascended.
They did. I know, but that's what I'm saying. Maybe that's what people will do.
Maybe we'll all ascend. Yeah, it could happen too, I guess. And then the only people that will be left are the folks who didn't care to ascend, and they're like, "Crap, what do we do now?"
I'm going to get on this spaceship and go do that way. I'm going that way. I don't even know what that way is.
But I do think that to a certain extent, just from pure breeding aspects, the people that have a drive are going to breed, and the ones that don't have a drive will not breed. So there will be genetic aspects that will come into play. The people that have the drive to keep doing things and to self-improve and to change their experiences and whatnot, there'll be them and there'll be the very poor. Those two groups are the groups of people that will breed.
I was going to say it's kind of the opposite at the moment, that people who drive tend to not have kids so young, or at all, with people with no drive, they have kids because they're just going to follow
and there's financial benefit in some cases to having kids. I do think, by the way, though, the interesting little side note.
Who has kids. I'm not trying to put down people who have kids. I have 3 of my own, so I obviously have no drive at all.
I know. I think by the interesting side note to all of this is actually one of the reasons why the human race is becoming longer lived is because women are having babies later. Because of one of the organism's main purposes for existing is to carry on the species and perpetuate the organism. So they did an experiment with mayflies. This actually, to be honest, sounds like the most dangerous experiment I've ever heard of in my entire life, and also one of the most difficult. They removed the reproductive organs from female mayflies, and then they put them back in later on. I don't know how you do that. I don't know what kind of process is involved in removing the reproductive organisms from mayflies.
Very tiny surgical instruments.
Apparently, yeah.
Nanotechnology.
And simply just by removing their reproductive systems and then making it so that they reproduce later and later, they now have mayflies that live 10 times longer than they used to, which is what terrifies me, because imagine fruit flies that live 10 times longer than they used to. You just feel never
dead bugs. Okay.
Not really what I. Although in retrospect, like an opposite, I think they are going to have to change the way that they do certain things. I read an article the other day that said that male sperm population has been decreasing since the 70s. It is now less than half than what it used to be. And at some point in the future, they see female women not needing men to reproduce, that they see a future where that could be possible. So
or might be necessary.
Did you guys talk about this last week?
Well, it's been ongoing. It's definitely a thing, It's
I just think, and it's kind of strange when you think about it, like in our time frame. But they're like, it's really not that far away. That'll we go extinct.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, okay. But then I'm thinking to myself, if you have like hundreds and hundreds of years to live, like obviously Tanis didn't have her children until she was hundreds and hundreds of years old. I mean, obviously she went and she had her stuff. She had her fun. I mean, I'm thinking I had hundreds and hundreds of years to live, and I knew that I wasn't going to go bad. My little biological parts, weren't going to fade off. That all that was intact, because right now women have like a deadline.
You're on the clock.
Yeah, there's a clock. I probably would still be out like adventuring and like with my husband and doing all kinds of crazy things, but because there's a clock. So that's interesting. If there wasn't a clock,
what would we do?
Probably hundreds of years.
Artificial homes may change all of this. So that's another piece of it that could separate out. How do you educate our millions of, clone children that are out there?
Crushes.
Actually, I touch on that a bunch of times in the books. There's mention made to the fact that some places have baby farms, and I typically think that they don't work, because I feel like you would just create a bunch of people that were narcissists and had no social skills and didn't understand how to work with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which is why
That's a nature versus nurture argument.
it is, yeah. But one of the big things is Joe's mom had 107 kids because she was good at having kids and wanted to have kids. You know,
That's another thing you could have
kids.
Kids for like, how long? I mean,
well, the government actually sponsored her just to have children. Like that was her job from the government.
It may come to that. But what was that movie? Children of the Earth, or no, it was Man of, I don't know, where there was no babies anymore, and this woman showed up and she was pregnant.
Oh,
Yeah.
There's been a couple of those.
yeah. Children of Men. I think.
Children of Men, yes. That is not so far-fetched, it seems.
Well, there's other interesting things too. Like Jenny and I were talking quite a bit about the male sperm count thing, and I think that the studies, I assume that the doctors and people researching it did a bunch of other things, but I don't really know if they checked all things. For
They
example,
said it started small, and now they've gotten so much data. Now it's hard to deny.
but I guess the thing that's kind of interesting is like, well, what is it from? Is low sperm count simply because people say that it's not, but when I went for fertility tests, the doctors were like, if you masturbate a bunch, you're gonna have lower sperm count. You know.
They said that's not true.
Which is actually, they said that's not true in the study, but yet I've talked to doctors who said it is true because you can only produce sperm at a certain rate. So if it's not storing up, it's not there. Because they're talking to that study that there was less semen and less sperm.
Right, they were talking in that study that
you can't
basically it's a
you don't just
production issue,
instantly
not really a storage issue.
but you don't really recharge instantly. It takes a while to recharge. So the acceptability of masturbation could quite literally be the only thing. And the interesting thing too is they didn't do studies in countries where that is less common. They only did studies in Western countries where it's far more acceptable to do that than it is elsewhere. But it seemed like a bit of a flaw. At first I was all bought into it, and then Jenny brought in all these other facts. I'm like, yeah, you know what? They did sort of seem to lead to certain conclusions, or at least the people writing the article were leading.
Yeah.
That's the thing with articles like that. You wonder, is there correlation and causation?
Yeah.
Or is it just correlation and not causation?
Yeah. Well,
The one that I read says that they've been watching the trend for quite some time. They have thought about all these other theories, and now it's at a place where most scientists can't deny that it actually is happening.
yeah, it's true. I think I read the same article.
Not a dumb thing. This is something they've been watching since the 70s, and they've been studying it, and they are still trying to find causes. They still don't know exactly what it is, but they think that not only is it something that we're probably eating, but probably something that happens in the womb. Probably something that that men are being born this way.
And other argument is that we're all overweight.
Well, no, it says there's something about a hormone thing that's supposed to happen at the end. The estrogen is supposed to drop off at the end when you're building a boy in there, and that something's going on that it's not happening, and therefore some men are born just predispositioned like that.
Yeah,
and then some other things that they do in their lifetime could affect that too, but mostly it's happening from the start.
Yeah.
That they're just predispositions, they're just making less, and then it goes generationally, just keeps going.
There's on top of that, by the way, there's also the thing where the Y chromosome's days may be numbered.
That's another thing they said.
Yeah, just the way it's constructed.
What's numbered?
The Y chromosome.
The Y chromosome.
They think, I mean, it's got some life in it, but they said like in a million years.
Yeah, tiny, weak, very tiny, very weak little chromosome.
Yeah.
Compared to the 90 X chromosomes.
Yeah.
Hey, we got X chromosomes too. You know, that's what has all of our information in it.
All babies start out as girls.
Yeah, well, all of the information to build a human is in the X chromosome. It's not in the Y chromosome.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
They all start out.
So
And
we haven't.
You have an advantage because if there's something bad on one of them, then the other one can take over.
Yep.
This is why there's so many male genetic
Guys
disorders.
dying for us too, unless it's the future.
But on the plus side, men have a biologically simpler life that we are quite happy to have. Sorry, ladies.
Honestly, I think it's because men are just sitting down a lot more than ever. And I think it's like...
Yeah, it used to be a...
And also on top of that...
Those studies that say sperm count has dropped are mostly all done in Western countries, which is a minority of the population.
Yep.
And I think they need to do a lot more studies in countries where men aren't sitting down as much.
The other
Right.
thing, too, to Alice's point, where Alice, you were saying that it's something that happens in the womb at the end. Women are sitting down more too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's with the way they're eating,
Yeah.
I think has to do with it too.
I had
They
a,
said something about processed foods could have a lot to do with it. All the chemicals we introduce to help society thrive to get to where we are could have had a seriously negative effect in the long run that we just didn't see. And so we find a chemical, we eliminate it, and we replace it with something else and don't know what it's going to be like. It's like a crapshoot.
one of the things sort of along those lines is people make the assumption that somehow 400 years ago we only ate pure natural things all the time.
No.
But, you know, like we drank water out of scum-filled ponds, you know, and
You get dysentery.
we used to
Oregon
have,
Trail.
there used to be things everywhere called tar pits, where oil was just sitting on the surface of the planet, seeping into like our water supplies. We don't have that anymore because we burned all that oil, but it used to be there, you know, like we used
Just
to.
because it's natural doesn't mean it's good for you.
Yeah, cyanide
Right.
is perfectly natural.
Right.
You know,
It's
so.
very natural. Belladonna, very natural process.
Those are natural.
Yeah, oil is actually
Arsenic.
very natural.
Yeah.
So, we have this sort of the assumption, like in ancient Rome, they were using lead pipes. You know, we've been doing stupid stuff like that all along. So it's not like we used to have a
Crystals, they use that forever.
I mean, and we look at like cats. My cat eats fuzz. You know, so like the natural state of things is like not necessarily the best thing.
Not necessarily. It's like you got to take that, but then use a smart approach about it.
Yeah. We have, by the way, we were going to talk about like interstellar trade and how information.
I know.
And we didn't get to any of that.
Yeah.
We'll save those for future.
These are gonna have to be like their own podcasts.
They are- well, I was
I
thinking,
we
are we going
talked
to?
about like education and
I didn't talk about scientific advancement moving so fast. I mean,
Well, it's
Good
difficult
job.
to talk about
Right.
education without also
That's it,
talking
though.
about change, you know, because
Yeah.
it is a
change.
constantly moving,
Right.
you try and place a pin in what humans will be like in a specific time. And there's
Right.
so many things rotating around that influence it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
we should have a whole podcast about if you were when we reach immortality, like we're living and we don't die.
Do
Like
you
you said,
want to
what
be
kind of
immortal?
life would we have? That would be kind of an interesting.
This
I
actually
think I would go through an entire 10-year period where I was just a sloth on a couch.
You got
Not
to pay
kidding.
for that couch, man. How are you going to do that?
I did that once. The other thing
I
too,
would
that
have done
you
that
get
in my 50 years before that. I would have paid for that couch.
into what heaven would like from a religious standpoint. Heaven is
Mhm.
sort of. I actually saw the look on your eyes, Lisa. I knew you were thinking about this too.
Right.
The concept of heaven is actually that immortality. It's the same idea. Like, what do you do when you're in heaven? I actually had a conversation with a reader about that recently, where he said a lot of times heaven sounds really boring to me because it just
Mhm.
doesn't sound like, because we're those of us who do well in the world and who are go-getters. We love challenges, and the concept of many concepts of heaven do not sound challenging.
Concept of inactivity is terribly boring.
I think that heaven may be tailored to the person.
But that's not
There's
just really,
hundreds and thousands of people to talk to
that's
learn.
not-
We got to save this one. I think we're at an hour and a half now. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
we'll
such a
get there
big
another time. We'll get to
subjective
the
topic.
eternal
the
being.
interesting thing
I
is
have
that-
words to write.
I know, so do I. But the
I have words
interesting
to
thing about that concept of heaven is that it's not that much different than what we're describing, but a place where you may or may not die. What do you do with yourself? It's sort of a similar
Yeah.
idea.
It's utopia. It's
You
utopia
die.
just in a different form, in a different phase, but it's utopia.
heaven is a university where I get to wander into any class and learn anything I want.
Yeah.
But you
Some people
couldn't.
maybe it would
You
be.
still have to have credit chits, and you still
Maybe.
have a
Maybe.
job, and you still have to there's still personal
There will
relationships.
still be
Allison's
tests.
heaven, Allison's heaven sounds
Just
Life
because, no, I'm
2.0.
talking about if we live forever, things would still potentially be crappy.
Yeah, there's still
Yeah.
pressures.
Just because we live forever doesn't mean we're not going to just still be dickheads to each other, and we're not trying to kill each other off. I mean,
Yeah.
there's still going to be the dangers of the world that are not supposed to be.
Even in the Star Trek remakes where they
Right.
were doing the education in the air, bullying survived. So
There you
hooray for that.
So we will probably still be dickhead humans if we
Yeah.
live forever. And I think in heaven, the biggest promise of heaven was that there's supposed to be no more pain. You could live for 1,000 years,
Some
and
people like it.
you will still feel pain because
That is
it's
not
part of the human existence.
that is not a sadist heaven.
No, that is not a status heaven. No.
There's no
Or
space in
masochist
heaven.
heaven.
What if
I
there
think,
is
by the way, this
Yeah.
sort of goes back to one of our core premises for Aeon 14 is that humans are going to human.
right?
They're gonna
Humans are
human.
So
Okay. Obviously, we could talk a lot more about this. I think this is becoming one of our key things, but we got to tie it up for this episode. Where did my notes go on this? Okay.
You don't have this memorized by now.
I know I need to.
Where's your outro?
Thank you for checking in with us. As always, if you've got any questions you'd love us to talk about, although we're not doing too good at that. We need to. Well, wait. This was a question.
This was a reader topic.
This was a question. So we're doing all right. Good. We're doing good. Hit us up in the Facebook group. Do a search for Aeon 14 fans, or it's Facebook/groups/Aeon 14 fans. Also Aeon14.com or on Patreon. You can search for that. And yeah, hit us up. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next week on The Intrepid. All right. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.